Hey friends, it's Catherine here from Sacred Heart Alchemy and Divinely Inspired Feminine Leaders. And I am here with my day 2 campfire story. And I decided to just jump on and do this one live. Yesterday I actually wrote the story out. I don't know, it was my first one. I just wanted to make sure I covered all the points. And today I decided I'm just gonna jump on live and wing it and trust that whatever comes out is going to be a-okay, and hopefully there's something in here that will be meaningful for you as well. So cozy up to the campfire, bring your s'mores, whatever you have to drink. Let's get cozy here around the campfire. So today's prompt that I chose was, what's something, I did write this down so I get it right. What's something you used to not want people to know about you? And I suspect that there are some of you who know this story or know this thing about me, but not most of you. But I'm sharing it because in my work, I have the honor of hearing people share things that they don't necessarily want people to know about them, right? I'm a trauma therapist. I'm a, purpose coach. And so a lot comes up in my work with people around their old trauma or things about growing up or things that have happened to them that they just don't want other people to know. And it just occurred to me as I was reading through the prompts that if I'm inviting people to be that vulnerable, that raw, that honest with me, then I can be that vulnerable, that raw, that honest with you. It just seems, I don't want to say fair, but it feels like it evens the playing field somehow. That I'm not somehow different from you or above or better just because of the work that I do. So that was one reason I decided to do this one. Also because it is personal. I don't always share it with people who are my clients, whether those are therapy clients, it would not necessarily be appropriate to share, or even my coaching clients, where I am a little bit more kind of open about myself and I share stories more. But I'm also sharing it because it's a universal story. Let's face it. As you hear the story, you'll understand what I mean. And what I'm hoping is that by sharing my story, it will sort of demystify, I hate to say normalize, perhaps give other people who are listening some courage, some support, I think, more than courage, to share their own story. And also that I hope it will help people to release shame or self-doubt or some story that they have maybe been putting on themselves around a similar experience. And for me, I find, they ask one thing that I didn't want people to know, but for me, things come in groupings. Like there's nothing that ever really stands alone, right? There's always context. There's always something that came before. There's always something that came after. And I'm someone who loves patterns. I love recognizing patterns. I love puzzles. So to me, it only makes sense to provide some context. So I'll be talking about more than one aspect of this. So here we go. Gathered up around here, the campfire story number 2. So this story takes place down at the Jersey Shore. I grew up in New Jersey. About 50 years ago, maybe a little bit less than 50 years ago. It was, in my later high school years, and there was a party at the second home, vacation home of a girl in my class who I was graduating with, and she had a brother 2 years older. And so the classes, my grade and that grade, there seemed to be a lot of brother-sister combinations or just friend combinations. So there was a mixed grouping at this party of the class that was sort of 2 years above mine, and as well as my class. And one of the things that I want to, again, provide some context around is, how groups sort of have inner circles and then, sort of people who are on the periphery. Well, my MO, I think mostly through life, has been, so this is one thing you don't know about me, that while I get along with everybody and I know a lot of people and lots of acquaintances, I haven't tended to be on the inner circle, right, of a lot of friend groupings or whatever. I tend to be on the periphery and move around a little bit more. So that was part of the energy of this party. I was invited, I was sort of in the group enough to be invited, but not really in the tight inner circle of the girls who were mostly at this party. So it was the 70s. Let's face it, there was a lot of drinking. There was, a lot of pot smoking. There was probably some other stuff going on. I don't think I did anything else that night. But, as the party went on, people were getting pretty wasted, I would say is a pretty good, way of describing that. And, there was dancing and flirting and, all kinds of stuff that happens with kids in their late teens when the alcohol is flowing and it's the end of the school year, it's summer, people are just feeling, right, loose, and it's party time. And at one point, the woman now, who was in my grade, and her older brother, who was 2 years in that class, 2 years above us, made an announcement that they had set up sleeping arrangements and everyone was to sleep in their assigned place. And she and her boyfriend and the brother and his girlfriend sort of had, the two main sleeping quarters, and everybody else was spread out. And they sort of said, listen, we don't want people hooking up because, we don't want to have to change the sheets so that when my parents come down, they don't know we had this party here, right? So the instruction was given, and, at some point, people started, or I went to sleep in my assigned place that happened to be in a room with bunk beds. So I was on the bottom, and a friend of mine was sleeping in the bunk above me. Went to sleep, sort of, I don't know whether I went to sleep or passed out. Hard to tell in those days. Combination of falling asleep and passing out. And, really, really dead to the world, so to speak. And I woke up suddenly to find someone on top of me, laying on top of me. Turns out it was the older brother of someone in my class, who I knew, but, not well. And I was shocked. I was half asleep. I was probably still half drunk or hungover or in some phase of that. And I was so paralyzed in that moment that I didn't do anything, right? I just sort of laid perfectly still, quietly, and was, I think, just sort of in some kind of shock experience. I do remember my friend getting up and leaving the room, getting out of the top bunk. And I remember that distinctly because I knew from what she had shared with me about her own experience that she was getting triggered by what was happening in the bunk below her. So, to put language to it, this guy raped me. I eventually, he was, this big football player guy. I eventually fell back to sleep, waking up a few times to notice that he was still sort of, positioned over me in some way. And eventually the morning came and I woke up and he was gone. And I was laying in the bed, still sort of in shock, remembering what had happened or the best that I could piece it together. And the door was open and I could hear voices, excuse me, my throat chakra. I could hear voices, girls' voices, girls who I considered to be friends, although not, close friends. I could hear them downstairs saying things like, what the hell is she doing up there? Why doesn't she just leave? She knows she needs to get out of here. All this sort of judgmental, mean girl kind of conversation where it was clear that they had been given a story or they had been told something. Maybe they had a question about why my friend wasn't still in the room. I don't know. Or maybe this guy said something about, sleeping with me, whatever. I don't know what it was. I just know that I was sitting upstairs in this bed, paralyzed, like frozen, unable to move, hearing all of this judgment, condemnation, assumption. No one came up to talk to me or, check in or even say, it's time for you to go. It was just all of this talk downstairs. And so I eventually gathered up my wits and gathered up my courage and my stuff. And it was I think Cape Cod style house. And so the stairs went down the side of one wall and the front door was right in front. And I remember just coming down those stairs, sort of, keeping my eyes straight ahead, not trying to notice or pay attention to anyone who was sitting around. And I went right out the door and into my car. Fortunately, I could get out. There weren't any cars behind me. And I drove home, from the shore that day. And it was never spoken of again. And I didn't tell anyone about it for years and years and years. I think I was, probably in my 50s before I shared it with anyone. And, this was long before the Me Too days. This was long before we knew no is no. And so I think, like a lot of us, if this has been your experience, we question ourselves. Did I do anything to bring this on? Was I flirting with him? Did I, did we set this up and in some drunken state I agreed to it? Like I didn't know the answers to those questions. And so there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of self-blame. I know now that, and why didn't I fight? Why didn't I try to get him off me or whatever? Because the fact that the guy probably weighed twice as much as I did. And, but, we live with all of those questions, thinking that somehow his choice to assault me was my fault. So if any of you have experienced that and are still carrying any of those beliefs or doubts, I hope my sharing my story and my recognition finally after so many years that no matter what had happened prior to that moment, he had no right to come in and without consent, with me in a sound sleep, do what he did. So that's the first thing that I used to not want people to know about me. As I said, in the last, 15 years or so, I've told some people, but, it's not something that I talk about or share. But there's a second piece to this that has also been sort of a pattern in my life. And this is probably the thing, I'm getting emotional as it's bubbling up now, that I have been even less ready to talk about. And I don't know whether this experience at that party with those women was the first time I ever felt betrayed by a group of women who I thought were friends, but it hasn't been the last time. There have been several times in my life where this theme has come up, where women who or in that case, girls who I had hoped would have my back, or at least come to me, or not jump to conclusions. But sadly, that was not the last time. And the last time was not that long ago with a group of women who were part of a spiritual community that I'd been in for a long time. And something happened completely out of the blue, because it's not that long ago, and this is public. I don't want to say too much more about it. But this pattern of betrayal, or feeling betrayed by women in groups mostly, not individuals, has really been something that I've been challenged with and have struggled with. And I know in my heart that it has impacted how much I trust women and how close I allow myself to get to women. So, and I know that this is all part of a patriarchal system, that this is all part of a sister wound where women are set up against each other, we're put in competition, there's a lot of comparison, right? There's jealousy. So I get that this is a pattern that's not unique to me, that many women have felt, that is, in fact, part of a bigger institution of the patriarchy. So I just want to speak into that. So there's multiple parts to this story. I never really wanted to talk about the rape. I never really wanted to talk about the betrayal. And I never really wanted to admit that even though I work with women and I'm committed to working with women, and I've always been passionate since the time I was in my late teens, maybe this has something to do with it, to help empower women and help women's stories to come forward. And all of that has been my passion. So it's this strange sort of misalignment or disconnect a little bit, that I also have this personal history where there have been times in my life where I have felt very much betrayed, and that has somewhat undermined my trust with women. So that's I think that's my campfire story for today. And as I said, I really hope that as I share these stories, I mean, they're from my point of view, right? Because I'm answering a prompt from my experience and my point of view. But ultimately, I hope they don't come across as just me talking about me, because that's never what I've wanted to do. I hope that they'll sort of build on each other, and they will resonate with those of you who are watching and listening, and you can see or hear or feel yourself in some of these stories. And I really hope that if that's true, that you will open up and share your experience. I'm doing this in this Divinely Inspired Feminine Leader Facebook page because one of my strong desires is to create community. And I think by sharing our experiences, that helps create community in a large way. Also, because I'm a little scared about doing it on my personal Facebook page, because there are just people who are going to be on there and who are going to see it. That maybe I'm not quite ready for that yet. So I'm sort of brave, but I'm not completely brave. So anyway, have a beautiful rest of your day at camp. And I hope to see you back here tomorrow. All right. Blessings, everyone.